Today I had the beautiful Kyra come on and talk about DV. We do talk about topics regarding domestic violence, so a trigger warning for anybody who feels uncomfortable around these topics. She's a domestic violence prevention advocate, addresses violence, power and control, and anyone can reach out to her whenever you feel comfortable. Let's jump straight into the episode. Hello, Kyra.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah,
this is the first time I've met you, but I've spoken to you over the phone and we've chatted about what we want to talk about today. So I'm super excited to have you on.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're currently doing at the moment, and because we are obviously this is a part 2 to our DV chats. We want to bring awareness to it, and you obviously are an advocate for it at the moment. So tell us about how you got there and what you're currently doing at the moment.
Yeah, so I became an advocate because I've got that lived experience of DV. Mm-hmm. It took me a while to really sort of come out and say, like, I'm going to start like talking about this issue. I think going through all that trauma myself, there was a few years where I kind of just like buried my head. You know, I felt, not that I felt shame, but I just felt like I didn't want the world to know who I was anymore. Mm-hmm. And after sort of things not really getting any better, I was like, well, you know what? The only thing I have left in this world is like really my voice. Mm-hmm. So from that, it's when I started speaking up and telling my story, you know, where the law allows me to. Yeah. And just sort of, it's all kind of stemmed from that lived experience.
Yeah. You currently do advocating for it, and where has that started and what are you currently physically doing to promote?
I do a lot on my own social medias, mm-hmm. But I also like write to a lot of MPs and everything. Mm-hmm. I've gone down to Parliament a few times to have a few meetings there and just like discussing like where like things are failing and what mm-hmm. needs to be done. I probably spend a lot more time on like the social medias and like to advocate locally. Mm-hmm. Being a Penrith girl as well, like I was born and raised here.
So you're from the area?
Yeah. So I was born here. At 22, I decided to move across to the UK, and I was there for almost 8 years, I think it was. And it's when I was in a DV relationship, and I realised all like sort of the laws and everything that really were failing me. It's when I was able to come home and have that safety net. There was a lot of people in Penrith who did a lot for me while I was still stuck overseas. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of my way of also giving back a little bit, mm-hmm. Because I had such an amazing amount of support when I needed it most. But I think also around the trauma that's sort of followed with it, people just thought, you know, you're home now, you're fine, you're safe. And I was like, well, actually, no. Mm-hmm. I was pretty quiet originally when I first came home, and didn't really talk about these things, and it was a lot of trauma. There was a lot of like emotional healing and things like that, and trying to sort of fit back into like the world again. Mm-hmm. But also it's like when you'd lived away for so long and you'd like learnt a different culture and everything, to fit back in, it was equally as hard. Yeah.
And how old were you at the time when you moved over to the UK?
I was just turned 22.
Right. Yeah. And you were there for 8 years?
Yeah, just about 8 years.
Wow. So. And that's where you experienced that kind of relationship, was over there. So you were away from your friends and family, I'm assuming?
My whole network, yeah. So all my family and friends and everything were here. And obviously I made friends overseas. But you know, when we think about like Penrith community, mm-hmm. we are a different breed, I think, you know, and after actually traveling overseas and seeing so many different places, the community here we have is just absolutely extraordinary and mm-hmm. very, very unique.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah. And so all your family still live around here as well?
Yeah, they're all local, yeah.
Yeah. And what I wanted to talk to you about is what support did you have at the time over there? Because you were quite young. And what I wanted to really kind of talk about, and wherever you feel comfortable, is being in it. How long were you in the relationship for? Sorry, because obviously I haven't heard your story before.
Yeah, I think it would have been about 10 years almost.
You were in the relationship?
Yeah,
for?
I can't remember exactly, but yeah, it was a long-term relationship.
Yeah. And did you travel over there together?
No, so I met him over there.
Yeah. You would have been quite young. 22.
Yeah, quite young. We were actually friends for a good while before we were in the relationship. Mm-hmm. So it's like we'd sort of like built up that good friendship first. But then it was once we were in the relationship that things really started to change. Mm-hmm. The support that I had was like generally just my friends and family, but mostly over here, because the people over here knew who I was from the beginning. And I think when, you know, as a 22-year-old girl living on the other side of the world, I went by myself. Like, you know, I packed up my bags one day and decided, you know what, I'm going, you know, didn't have anywhere to even stay when I got there. I literally just like was like, this is what I'm doing. Yeah. I'd booked like a place for like 2 weeks, and I was like, I have no idea where my next steps are. It's literally, I've got two weeks accommodation, and then, you know, wherever it goes.
In your early 20s.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think when I fell into that sort of relationship and I started to see the signs, at the time, I think I excused a lot of behaviour, and it was really around that coercive control. And I think being, you know, an independent woman who moved overseas by herself, to slowly see her life sort of chip away, it was my friends and family over here who supported me the most. But obviously that's a phone call away, and you know, on the opposite side of the world, like, you know, different time zones and everything. So it was quite limited. I think in terms of like now being back over here, you know, it's those same support networks, and the friends that I did have in the UK, you know, they've still got my back. Yeah. And you said that you were in the relationship for 10 years. So did you come home while still being in a relationship? Or? I'm quite limited in what I can talk about around that, purely because family law is involved. It was in the UK that we had to go through the family law, and I had to apply for a relocation to come back over here, which obviously successful with, you know, very, very grateful to be home. But yeah, very, very limited. That would have been very difficult for you. I remember just feeling like I had absolutely no one, and whilst, you know, there was support, this was through COVID where borders were closed, you know, you couldn't move around, you couldn't do a lot of things that, like even going to a service, or, you know, not that I did at the time, but when we're in lockdown over there, you couldn't still. So I know through COVID, we did see a lot of relationships like have that increased DV. You know, you're sitting in a home together, people were losing their jobs, you know, financial stress, your kids at home, things like that. I think all of those kind of things might have played into it, but I certainly saw signs earlier and I ignored them. Yeah. And when did you realise, like, hey, this is not okay, there's something wrong here? And what made you... Who was the first people that you reached out to, and what made you reach out to them? And when you did reach out to them, did you feel like they understood where you were coming from? I think it was my mum and dad who I reached out to first. I had been on holidays over here and everything, so you know, there was little things that they could see themselves where they raised like a little bit of like red flags as well. But while I was overseas, obviously there are legal barriers and, you know, jurisdictional issues and everything when you're married, especially when you have children. But mum and dad were probably the first two I reached out to, and they sort of did a lot of the research and everything for me, because it wasn't really an option for me to do it at home. So they did a lot of that support and like making calls, finding out, you know, what I can do. But we always had to try and find like a safe time to be able to have those conversations, to relay that back to me. Yeah. And, you know, you hear the word trauma bond being thrown around a lot. Did you feel like you kept going back to the same situation and making excuses for him and being manipulated? Did you feel like you experienced that in your relationship, or were you quite aware of what was going on? It's hard to say, I think, because I think when I reflect back on it, who I am now and what I know now, it's like, oh yeah, I absolutely did. But I think at the time, I wouldn't have recognised it. As like, there's relationships have arguments, and, you know, how we deal with those, it's not really domestic violence until it's a pattern. And I think, you know, when something happens the first time, you generally have a chat, you discuss it, you know, you say I'm sorry's, and, you know, we won't do it again. And then it's like the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. It's like, well, when does now sorry, you know, stop being the sorry? I think I did see these things, and I definitely think there was some kind of trauma bond in the fact that, you know, it's like, oh, but I love him. I love him. But it's like, love does not equal what you're doing to me. Yeah, exactly. And I think there comes a point where you have to kind of realise, like, what is your boundaries as well, and what are you okay with? Because someone like that can be quite manipulative. Yeah. And when did you realise, like, hey, I have reached my limit? And is that when you reached out to people, or were you reaching out before? I think it was something that I kind of saw over time as I saw my independence be sort of taken over. Knowing that I moved to the other side of the world by myself, was financially stable, to then having to rely on someone was really sort of hard pill to swallow there. And when it was that person who was sort of taking that control away from me, it's like no matter how much I argued that, you know, well, I'm perfectly capable, I can do this, like I can go out, and that person being like, no, you can't. It's like there was a part of me that was just like, oh, maybe I can't. Like there is that self-doubt, like, oh my gosh, like, well, you're from here, so you must know what this area is and things like that. And it's not until you sort of really see like the magnitude of the issue that you're realizing that actually it's not you. But it is a very common perpetrator trait to really chip away at someone's self-esteem and to make you self-reliant on that person.
And then you doubt your own kind of reality. And
the reality certainly hit. I think for me as well, I probably realized it sooner, but being overseas as well, and you know, having a child and everything, is that there's a lot of those different barriers involved. You know, it's not like simply, you know, just break up, leave. You know, it's not that easy. It's not that easy at all. And like you hear, like, you know, why didn't she just leave? And it's like, well, actually, you know, we've still got a lease together. We live in another country together. We, you know, we have a child. We have this. We have that.
I feel like people who say that are mainly men who have never been in that situation before, and I absolutely hate when I hear that question. Why didn't she leave?
There are women who say it too.
Exactly right.
They're the ones who were able to leave, but they had a completely different set of circumstances.
And at the moment, there's a lot of things in the news about domestic violence due to the recent issues that have been occurring locally around us. Did you feel like at the time when you come back home that there was enough support around you, not just from your family, but from the community and the government?
I think so I've been back home since June 2021. I'm only now sort of been able to find myself not quite on top, but at least not at the bottom of the river anymore. It was jurisdictional issues, you know, when it's like new country, new clean slate. There was a lot of services that I didn't know about. There was obviously through COVID, everyone was dealing with their own demons and battles and things like that, especially like mental health and everything. I think it's taken me a longer journey because of like my circumstances. I can't say obviously for other people and where they've ended up and things. I think it's taken me almost 3 years to really start getting the help that's actually genuinely needed. And, you know, at some points, you know, you did need a little bit more financial help. But I feel like there was less services support than there was just local community. I feel like local community have been there for me more so than whatever service or anything is available.
Because obviously there has been a lot of issues going on at the moment, and people are saying that there's not enough happening, and no one's doing enough to prevent it. The government's obviously introduced a new financial benefit, I think it is that correct?
It's not quite new. I think there's an escaping violence payment for up to $3,000, and it comes in a package of like cash plus vouchers. It's not a new concept. It's been around for a little while. I think what now has been made, it's permanent, and they've increased the price. To me, like, yes, it's helpful. It certainly does help, but not every single person has no access to money. But also, like, it's all fine and well saying that these things are available, but the eligibility requirements for those, it's like if you have a certain job or whatever income threshold that they have for these things, it's like you sometimes might not even qualify for it, even if you have nothing.
But I think what I'm seeing from it is, the problem isn't mainly at the moment people leaving. It's actually when they do leave, things are still happening. And women are still being hurt. And it's not even so much with domestic kind of situations that I've seen. It's people are going out there getting these AVOs. These women are doing the right thing.
They're doing what they're told, and the system is failing them. And post-separation abuse is so very real and really not talked about. You know, I don't know if it's just like some egos where it's like you can't handle, you know, someone saying that I don't want to be with you, and having that sort of like that's their own internal, you know, demons.
Yes, exactly. Right.
But yeah, like you said, it's just like people do leave, and then the system fails them. It's like, well, you know, we'd leave, but like, where do you live now?
Yeah.
Where do you continue your life when systematically everything's set up against you?
Yeah, and how are these women supposed to feel safe? You know what I mean? And I think that's where, like, you know, the Prime Minister, like, well, I didn't know it was already in account, but he obviously made it permanent, say, for example. Like, that's all and well, and yes, it does help, but at the moment, is that the main concern? Because it's like these women are leaving, they're getting the AVO, they're going to the police, and things are still occurring. Like, obviously, recently in the news, there was that woman, Molly, and you hear of these stories over and over and over and over, and it's like, is that the main problem, or is there problems that we actually need to fix that happen before they need to leave? Like the mental health of men, and saying and bringing awareness to actually, let's not hurt women from the start. And it's like bringing, where maybe we need to bring more attention. Do you feel like we need to bring more resources and attention to the problem starting from the start, and maybe not always, you know, putting it on or trying to support the victim? Obviously, we do need to support the victim, but let's support it.
The preventative measures.
From that. Do you feel like they're doing enough at the moment?
No, not really.
To help with the preventative, and, you know, if someone does bring the attention to a friend or someone like that, what are they doing for these men who keep continually doing it? Is there anything out there at the moment?
From my experience, no, there's not enough happening. You see services that are trying to tackle the issue, but it's not coming at a government level. It is coming like from community-based services who either have seen something happen to them, like to a friend or something, and then they've like realized that this is an issue that they now need to tackle. But you think about even like men's mental health, it's like, if, you know, the stereotype is to man up and, you know, they're not talking about thoughts and feelings or whatever's bothering them, they internalize it, they come home and they, you know, take it out on their partner or something. It's like those kind of things aren't really being tackled at the moment.
No.
But it's like, you know, in the extreme cases as well of like the physical stuff, you know, like I've heard so many women say to me, I wish he just hit me, because that is an offence in the law. Whereas all of the other stuff isn't. Like the law doesn't sort of catch up with what's actually happening. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So with all that coercive control and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, coercive control was probably the worst one in my opinion. It's because they can literally chip away at you, like every part of you, and it's like mentally, it's, you know, without anything even physical, someone can take everything from you. And it's because I've heard like women previously say to me, like they've punched a wall next to my head. Like that's really intimidating behaviour. And as a vulnerable woman, you think, I don't want that to be my head next time. And that's where that coercive control comes in, because punching a wall next to your head is not an offence. It's, you know, it's intimidation. It shows a sort of character. But I don't know for myself, like if I've seen someone do something like that, that I would be like, oh, well, it wasn't me. He didn't touch me, so it's okay. And I think those are those kind of behaviours that women need to sort of start seeing, but men also need to acknowledge is a form of DV.
Yes, and actually bringing attention to the coercive control. So someone who doesn't understand what coercive control is, could you give us a little bit of an explanation?
So coercive control is basically being coerced and controlled. And that can be things by manipulating you to do something that you don't want to do, but you don't feel like you really have a choice. There's things like, even in the sexual assault area of that, of, you know, it's like they say, well, it's not rape because you sat there. And it's like, just because you didn't fight back doesn't mean you wanted it. So, and that's where that coerciveness comes in. It's like if you're genuinely petrified of this person and what they're capable of doing, or they've threatened the kids against you, or they've threatened to expose something about you, and you see things like even like revenge porn and things like that. It's like if they've got ammunition to use against you, they will, and that's when you start becoming compliant.
Exactly. But another thing, and I don't think coercive control is spoken about enough. I don't think, I honestly didn't really, like in our part 1, I learnt so much about it, and I really hadn't known much about it. And it becomes down to that controlling behaviour where it's like stalking your every move and making you question your reality and gaslighting and manipulating you. But I feel, what's your opinion on the fact that what's going on currently in the media where, you know, these women are leaving and they're still being hurt to someone? How would that make somebody feel who's in that situation, who wants to leave but is scared to leave, and then feels like they can't now leave because they're like, I'm still going to be hurt anyway, because even if I get a restraining order, these restraining orders are literally just a piece of paper.
I mean, that's a massive topic to that. I think we could talk for days on. It is one of the reasons why women don't leave. It's they are seeing the system fail them, and it makes them scareder, and it's sometimes easier to stay. I know through my own experience as well, it's like when you're having to think and like weigh up your options and strategy and different laws and, you know, that entire process, you look at it and it's like, actually it's safer not to say this, it's safer not to report that, it's safer to actually just sit here and deal with it, which is a part of the problem, because we don't have accountability for perpetrators. You know, if there is that physical where the police do take action, you get an AVO, but an AVO is just a piece of paper that says don't do it again to the same person. It doesn't mean that you can't split up and actually leave and that next victim knows anything about it.
Exactly right. And that's like, I don't know his name, but there was that man that had 5 AVOs out. It was locally around here. And then he went on a Tinder date with her and ended up murdering her. And why, it's all about protecting their privacy. But if someone has 5 AVOs, she would have never, well, I don't know from her perspective, obviously I'm not in her shoes, but I'm pretty sure you wouldn't want to go on a Tinder date with someone who has 5 women.
I think that is a huge topic that even my friends and I have talked about, is that, you know, how are you supposed to know that someone is like that unless you know and you're able to talk about it? There's obviously
like, why
privacy
are we
laws.
Protecting them? Like
why
this should be a public thing. If you have an AVO, this should be public so other women feel safe going on dates and meeting new people, and I think especially to the extreme of 5, like it's just ridiculous. And I think though, like, I feel like it's all about, and I feel like what could prevent these issues is if people were brought to people's attention, or they had some knowledge of who's actually dangerous and who's not. There's, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a Facebook group, and it's called Sis Is This Your Man? It's hilarious, some of the stuff on there. But so much of the stuff on there is like women posting about the abuse that they've been through with this guy, and watch out. And I'm like, and someone's like, oh my God, I went on a date with him. Yes, he was really weird. I didn't know whether to continue that day. Like, women are supporting other women. Like, why is the government not helping us?
Why is the onus on us to help our, you know, fellow women out in that space? Like, where is the responsibility on the government and the services to do that? Because at the moment, like that group is so heavily relied on.
I know.
And you hear the stories in it as well.
And like women are just posting pictures of like guys that they're going on a date with, like, oh, is this like I'm like, they're like, oh, like, is this, anyone know this guy? And I think people just don't feel safe now to even go on a date with someone they don't know, like, because of all this stuff that's going on. And I just think, I feel like there needs to be more public attention and stop protecting these men who do stuff like that, because they know that they can just do it and then get away with it and then go on a date with someone new that has no idea what's going on. Another story in New Zealand of that young girl. She was a backpacker from, I think she wasn't a backpacker. She was travelling from the UK, went on a Tinder date with someone who she didn't know, who murdered her. He literally went on another Tinder date while she was still in the hotel room, passed away. Like, he went on another Tinder date. Like, these people have no no self-awareness. They're going on Tinder dates all the time and they're meeting all these new people, and there's I don't know, and that just shows how brazen they are. They will just continue to do it. And I feel like, I personally feel like that could be another strategy that would help, is actually stop protecting them. Yeah,
absolutely. There was a case that I knew a guy who, when, thought it was a lovely guy, was fantastic to me, found out through the news that he had an AVO against him, and he was going to court. I saw in the papers afterwards that he escaped having his AVO extended because he told the judge that he hadn't been taking drugs anymore and it was all like drug related and everything, but he's clean now. And I know for a fact he is not clean. He was not clean. But the magistrates in there were just like, okay, well, he's said all these really wonderful things. He's said exactly what we wanted to hear. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, and you hear, it's like perpetrators say what they, what the other person wants them to hear.
Exactly.
And these courts are weak. Yes. And they're literally letting these people out without actually knowing the knowledge, because the system is based on evidence. And it's like, well, how can you provide evidence, like, the victim, that they are still doing drugs because you've got nothing to do with them anymore, or you're staying away from them, or you've changed your number, you've locked all of that up, you've protected yourself. But then the system basically says, well, this is what the information I have, and that's all I can go off. And it's like, but like, can I put my hand up and support that victim and say, I'm not a part of these proceedings, but I want to come in and testify, for you. Like,
exactly. And it's like, there's like another story of that Celeste Mamo. Her mum's very vocal and has spoken about it a lot. And she, they went and got, I don't know if you know the situation, but they went and got an AVO against this guy. She wasn't in a relationship with him. He was just literally a stalker. And they went and got an AVO on him. They went to the police, pretty much. They all said, like, there's nothing we can do. Yeah. Then he continued. Then they got an AVO on him. And then he continued to come to her house and murdered her. And her mother was saying, like, he should have had a tracker on him. Like, people should have been monitoring him, and what is he doing? Like, and there was nothing for her to feel safe. The AVO did absolutely nothing.
Yeah, absolutely nothing.
And it's just so horrible to hear that. People need to start talking about this. Not that needs to happen, but what needs to happen is that we need to start talking about this, bringing it to attention and saying, hey, look at what's actually happening.
Yeah, and we need a collaborative approach as well, because I feel like at the moment there's a lot of services where that service does this, that service does that, but no one's talking to each other. And then even when you think about, like, government, like state versus federal, is like in New South Wales versus Queensland, there's two sets of different rules, but then when you go to things like the family court, that's a whole different set of rule books that then play into all of these different state like policies. Right. So it becomes really complicated. It's like, if it's almost like a postcode lottery. It's like, well, if you live in New South Wales, you're a bit more protected than if you live in, say Queensland or whatever it is. And it's like, do we need to start thinking about where we live based on what laws we have to be safe?
It's ridiculous. And like, I just think that, like, we need to stop. I think we need to make it a public record. When somebody does something, let's be able to search them. Let's be able to make sure that we're safe continuing this relationship.
Well, there's the Hague Convention. So obviously mine had international elements in it. The Hague Convention was designed to stop child abduction across international borders.
Okay.
In the UK, I know that the family court had a quite high presumption of equal shared care. I know someone who has gone through the worst domestic violence and wanted to come back home to like the sanctuary of her friends and family in Australia. But the Hague Convention is a law to stop abduction. So the only pathway that woman has is to apply to the court, can I go home?
Is this because she has children?
Because she has children.
Sorry.
Yeah. Can I go home? They have no contact with the father because he is abusive. But she still lost her case. And how sad is that?
He won't sign off on it?
Because the abuser says no.
Yeah.
We just gave the abuser the power to dictate this young woman's life and the safety of the children.
Yes.
And it's really devastating to see, is because the laws say that, we should consider domestic violence. It does not say must. It does not say we must consider this. It's really at a discretion of whichever judge you get on the day.
And how lucky
to, you know, and obviously each solicitor has their own way of strategizing, you know, how your case is going to go and things like that. But it's when you look at like things like laws being used against you, and then, you know, we talk about it in the media. Sometimes I feel like it's an educational piece for some men to be like, oh, I didn't know I could also do that.
I was just about to say that. That's what I was literally just about to say, is what example are we setting when they see people get away with it, when they see other men get away with it?
Yeah.
Like,
it's
what
literally like, oh, mate,
saying?
you know, did you know we could also do this?
Yeah. It's like, oh, I can get away with it. They feel like they can just get away with it.
Because there's no accountability.
No.
Very, very little. And I reckon there's a small percentage of people who are held to account, but there's a higher percentage by, you know, a mile of people who are not held to account. And it is the victims that live in fear who have to hide. You know, it's just like little things like, can you really have a career when you can't put things on your LinkedIn anymore because, you know, you don't want to be found? You know, little things that people don't think about.
And these women that leave these relationships have to hide and protect themselves. But the people who are accused of hurting them can have full privacy, and they walk free, and everything they've done is hidden. I just don't. I think that's one thing that I feel like I seen that, you know, the Prime Minister, you know, he announced that thing about if you leave, they're going to give you a cash thing. And I think the problem is about these women that do leave then have to hide. But the men that do it, they fully get let off, and they have.
And that's what I mean. It's like it's great that there's a little bit of money for you, but firstly, how far can that get you, and how long does it take you? It's like if you were in a job where you now don't want to be known where you are, like, you know, your safety is like, if you have to hide yourself completely and you change jobs, change careers, you lower your salary, your whole world changes. Absolutely, everything changes. And, you know, that's great that there's like a $5,000 package, but, you know, like playing more into politics a little bit more is like some of those vouchers can only be used at Coles and Woolies. And we know right now that they're the most expensive places to go. It's just like, well, how far does that even get you anymore?
Yeah, exactly right. No, I think that's really important. And I think, do you know, like, obviously I don't know if you do know, but do you have any insight as to what they're doing preventative wise, or is it more just like taking care of people after this has happened? Like, are the government doing anything to prevent it?
Not that I know of in detail. Like, there is the national
I've looked
plan.
into it as well, and I don't know, which is why I'm asking you, because I've looked into it and I couldn't really see much preventative.
There's obviously on paper there is, but I don't see it sort of effectively rolling out. And I think when we've got a 10-year plan, and it's like, well, you know, I've been out of this relationship for about 4 years now, and it's like, but I'm still dealing with the post-separation impact as well. And it's things like even like mental health. It's just like, there was a time where I was just like an absolutely broken woman. You know, I couldn't get here and stand with you right now and have this conversation because I just needed to stay in bed and cry. You know, I haven't always been able to have this, and it's come with time. It's come with counselling. It's come with, you know, better support systems, you know, but most of those support systems have been my friends and family who were equally as traumatized and trying to deal with their own impact and feelings of everything. And, you know, like, shout out to the counsellors who have really helped me, because they've really been able to unpack that. But it's like, it's taken so many years to get to that point. And I think that's where these things like that package, like, it doesn't take you 4 years later. It doesn't help you. Like, it's obviously crisis, it's immediate response, but it's the ongoing issues where I feel like is quite lacking. And the preventative measures.
The preventative measures. And then, so what can you recommend to someone who is currently in a DV relationship, who's considering leaving and may not have the support of family and friends? What can you recommend for those kinds of women at the moment?
Well, there are services, obviously, available.
And what services are they, and where can they
there's
find
places
them?
like DV West in Penrith, Penrith Women's Health Centre, you know, calling 1-800-RESPECT and, you know, getting that first point of call. But obviously you've got to make sure you're doing it in a safe environment, whether it's, you know, going to your hairdresser and having a little bit of a conversation saying, I don't know where to go, you know, can I use your phone? I think going to a service is always going to be the best option, because they do have the resources, or they can point you in the right direction. And obviously, depending on your circumstances, you know, there's you know, whether you have children, don't have children, you know, you have a place to live, you know, they can really quite develop that safety plan for you. I guess where my issue sometimes lies is like, that's all fine and well to have the safety plan to leave, but it's the what happens after that safety plan for after, where I think I haven't personally had that experience of having to do anything like that, but I know that that is a concern for some people, but that's why I say, like, reach out to those services who can really sort of make that plan strategic for you personally.
Beautiful. Yeah. I feel like we've had such a good chat today.
Yeah.
And we've really talked. I feel like you could talk about this topic forever. But one question, and my final question that I wanted to ask you, is, in our mission to empower women, when do you feel the most confident and empowered version of yourself?
I think when I have my army behind me, backing me. I think knowing that solid support when you're feeling down is when they're pulling you up again. That's absolutely that moment when I'm like, okay, girl, you got this.
I love that. And you mean like the support of your friends and your family?
Yeah,
beautiful.
I think that those friends and family, you know, men and women, even sometimes strangers, you know, just sometimes when I'm feeling absolutely defeated and I just, you know, in my DMs, I get something saying like, keep slaying queen. I'm like, thank you. Like, I needed that. That's
all I need to hear is keep slaying queen.
So that's definitely something that really empowers me to keep going. And when I hear other people like reaching out, even strangers, like just coming in and saying like, you know what, we found what you said was really inspiring, you know, I didn't realize these behaviors and things like that. It's like when I hear that and I'm just like, okay, this is my purpose, I've got to keep talking about this. Yeah, exactly right. And I think that's why I wanted to talk to you about what is coercive control, because some people might be going through it thinking they're going crazy, having no idea that what you're going through has a label and it isn't right, and you do need to leave, or you can leave, and you don't need to tolerate it. And I think that's a massive thing that I've seen, is people blame themselves for what's happening, and it's like, I think these, you know, coercive control, manipulation, gaslighting, all these labels actually help people understand what's going on and give them that window of opportunity to research and understand and realize that, oh, hey, maybe this isn't on me, maybe this isn't my fault, and this behavior is actually not okay, and it's not normal, and it's not a boundary that I'm willing to accept. Set the standards high. And I think that's why we wanted to get you on the podcast today, and hopefully we do help someone. So I really appreciate you coming on today. Thank you so much. Thank you.